Welcome to People Keeping It Sacred, our program highlighting people keeping it sacred in the world. I'm Rabbi Heather Miller, founder of Keeping It Sacred, and I'm so excited to introduce you to today's guest, Rabbi Sally J. Priesand. Rabbi Sally J. Priesand is America's first female rabbi. She was ordained in June of 1972 by the Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion in Cincinnati, Ohio. Upon ordination, she accepted a position at Stephen Wise Free Synagogue in New York City, where she served for 7 years, eventually making her way to Monmouth Reform Temple in Tinton Falls, New Jersey, where she served as rabbi for 25 years. Her commitment to all things Jewish and the cause of peace and justice has led her to serve in leadership positions of various organizations, including as board member of the Center for Holocaust, Human Rights, and Genocide Education, Planned Parenthood, the Jewish Heritage Museum of Monmouth County, and all three of the major Reform Movement organizations, Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion, the Central Conference of American Rabbis, and the Union for Reform Judaism. She's been the recipient of numerous awards, including the Distinguished Alumni Award from the University of Cincinnati. The Women of Reform Judaism named an annual leadership award after her. And Good Housekeeping magazine named her as one of the women who changed the lives of our world. There have been countless other organizations who have recognized her remarkable leadership. Originally from Cleveland, Ohio, Rabbi Priesand now lives in Ocean Township, New Jersey with her adorable Boston Terrier, Zeke. What an honor it is to welcome you here today. Welcome.
Thank you so much. It's great to be with you.
It's so amazing to have you here, and I'm sure it wasn't easy, but you have really opened the hearts and minds and spirituality of so many to recognize that women too can be spiritual leaders, teachers, ritualists, liturgists, and community builders as rabbis. You know, I was thinking of one of my favorite teachings that Rashi teaches, that both ears and doors are alike because both can be opened and shut at will. I was wondering if you might start by sharing with us a little bit about some of your most effective methods for opening ears and opening hearts to the cause of women in the rabbinate.
Well, I think early on I discovered that can't argue about it. I remember when I was still in rabbinic school, I would meet people who would want to tell me why women shouldn't be rabbis. And I would just listen to them. And when they got done, I would say, thank you for sharing your opinion. And I would walk away. I feel very strongly that you just have to do it. And you have to allow people to experience it. And so, for example, my last year of school and my first year in the rabbinate, in addition to my synagogue work, I traveled all over the country speaking in various places, synagogues, Reform synagogues, conservative synagogues, various organizations, just so people could see me and could know that I'm human. And there isn't really anything so crazy about a woman being rabbi. And you would be surprised how many people came to hear me, which I'm a very private person. And it was very difficult for me to accept being out in the public. That's sort of the paradox of my personality, that I'm very private, but I chose a public profession. And I remember going, one of the first places I went was to a conservative synagogue. There were 1,000 people who came to hear me. Again, I was just in my 20s. And I also remember once I was interviewed on a television news program. And again, there were hundreds of people there. And when I saw the replay, the lights were shining in my eyes, so I couldn't see what I was doing. And when I saw the replay, all I noticed was that my head kept going like this the whole time. I was sort of pretending that I could see everyone, but I couldn't. And I just kept going like this. So from all of those, I tried to learn things. Probably you would also be surprised at how many news conferences I had. Communities were very happy to welcome me. I think too that it was really important for people to meet me, and I think that through my student pulpit work, that just being on the bema was important. That was, Judaism is an experiential religion. And being able to experience a woman in this role, I think helped a lot.
One of the most amazing things that I love about you is your idea of having these 4 principles. You've always kind of had this clear sense of purpose, from my understanding. I don't know if internally it was working that way for you, but your very clear 4 principles that you have put at the center of your rabbinate have really been what everything has built out from. And I was wondering a little bit if you could share with our listeners a little bit about what those core principles are. And for me, I'm really interested in, how did you come to define those 4 principles? And also, have they been challenged at different times in your rabbinate? And how are you able to keep them at the center despite those challenges?
This became a much larger document called I Believe. And in those early years when I was out speaking, that was how I always ended my presentation. And so it went far beyond the 4 principles, and people were very touched by that. God has played a very important role in my life. And when I was in rabbinic school, nobody ever talked about God. Believe it or not, that was something that just nobody ever talked about.
I believe it, but I don't know that our listeners would believe it.
And it was very surprising. But when I was in rabbinic school, I believed very strongly about an omnipotent God, which I don't believe in anymore. And I think that when I came out of school and I started working with people in synagogues, and people had so many tragedies, and it's our job as the rabbi to be there with them. And I discovered that I didn't believe anymore in an omnipotent God. I did not believe that God can do everything, that even as we depend on God, God depends on us, and we do God's work here on earth. And so, when I first time I had to bury a child, I was like, well, I just can't accept this anymore. And so I think I came more to believe in a God who gives us, who weeps with us, who grieves with us, and who gives us the strength to face the challenges that come our way. No life is free of difficulty. Everybody has difficult moments. And for me, God plays a role in that, in giving me strength. I guess another example I could give is I've had cancer 3 times. And so I'm very fortunate that I'm here to celebrate the 50th anniversary of my ordination. I'm very much aware of that. And when I didn't believe that God gave me cancer, therefore I couldn't ask God to cure me. So instead, I prayed for strength to come, whatever the future holds, to deal with it. And I think most importantly, I prayed for patience, the patience to endure a little more. And so I think my own experience helped me be more compassionate for the people that I serve. And it's all right. One of the things that I always taught my congregants was that it's all right to have doubts. In Judaism, we're supposed to ask questions. So believing in God has always been a very important part. As some people tell me, that I'm not afraid to preach about God, that I do it a lot more than probably they ever heard anybody else do it. I believe in Judaism as a way of life. I think that being a Reform Jew is more difficult than being any other kind of Jew. And that is because we get to make choices. Mm. But in order to choose to make an intelligent choice, you have to know what you're choosing from.
Right.
So that means you have to try everything. So when people tell me that they're Jewish, but they don't believe in God, I always say to them, well, that's okay, because in the Talmud, it says, God says to the people of Israel, I would rather have you follow my laws than believe in me, because perhaps through following my laws, you will come to believe in me. So that's always been very important to me too. Another part of my philosophy is to add to your life one mitzvah at a time. And that has been very important to my congregation. And I would never ask my congregation to do anything that I wasn't willing to do first myself. That it's important that what our job is to be partners with God in completing the world. And my congregation, when I first came, to be honest, they were very insulated and they were not very involved in the larger community. And that was something that was very important to me. And so little by little, I had to try to introduce them to the idea of a social action committee. It was very important to me to make certain that there was a Jewish presence in our community.
Right.
And we became known for that. We have 5 Reform congregations in Monmouth County. But we became known for that, and we tried always to participate in every important project in the community. And I'm pleased to say that they still do that, and they still consider that to be very important. We have tried to take every opportunity that we can to be involved. And the other example that I can tell you about is Interfaith Neighbors.
Yes.
Interfaith Neighbors started 33 years ago, and it was a group of people got together to try to solve the problem of people, our neighbors, living in motels. We wanted to give them a second chance, enable them to get back on their own 2 feet and out of the motels. And so our synagogue was called to be a founding partner. And the way that I responded is that besides sending 2 of my most devoted social action people to to work at the founding of the organization, and I agreed to be on the board as a vice president, I wrote a letter to our whole congregation, and I explained that I talked about Maimonides and what tzedakah really means, and that it's not really charity, but justice, righteousness.
Obligatory.
Yes, and we started a fund at our temple called the Fund for the Homeless, And all the proceeds of that fund go to Interfaith Neighbors. And Interfaith Neighbors started by being an organization that wanted to provide rental assistance to the working poor. And over the 33 years, we've grown into doing other things. And the president was a minister who got transferred. So I became the president. And I think I've been the president for about 20 or 25 years. I don't know.
Wow.
Actually, our temple really is the only Jewish congregation that continues to participate. And I'm the only Jewish person on the board.
Wow.
And so one of the things that I appreciate about it is that I get to teach people about Judaism.
Yep.
And every year it's become a tradition that at the annual meeting, I tell a story. Notice that story thing.
That's right.
I tell a story.
You are a rabbi.
Something Jewish tradition that that helps people understand more, and they really expect me to tell a story. They wait for it. So it's like the WRN and story time with Sally.
Right.
It's become a tradition. So I particularly like the name of our group, Interfaith Neighbors, because interfaith means that different faith communities can come together to make the whole community better for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's really important. And neighbors, well, for me, first of all, we always, our tagline is neighbors helping neighbors. And for me, it reminds me of love your neighbor as yourself. Absolutely. And I always say to people that in the Torah, where we read V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, there are no punctuation marks or anything else. And so you really can pause wherever you want. Don't have to just say, love your neighbor as yourself. Rabbi Leo Beck used to say, V'ahavta l'reacha, love your neighbor, kamocha, he or she is like you. And so that's one of the lessons that I always teach when we talk about the name of our organization. And we've grown to do many, many other things. We are very committed to revitalizing the west side of Asbury Park. And we have renovated nearly 40 homes. Wow. And made it possible for people who never thought that they would be able to have a home or now have homes. And it's one of the things I get to do as the president is say the prayer at when we dedicate the home and open it. And so there's a lot of things that can be done in a community to make it better for everyone if everybody works together.
Absolutely, you're right. I wanted to ask you, one piece of this is the idea that there are working poor, right? I don't want to jump over that concept, because I think a lot of people would think, oh, the homeless, people say they're lazy, they don't have a job, but you're talking especially about the working poor. So I wanted to see if you could break that down a little bit.
That is who we serve. You must have a job.
Right.
And, but we all know that in every life, sometimes something happens that you didn't expect. Right. Your car breaks down, somebody in the family is ill, you lose your job. And we don't want people to end up losing their home as well while they're trying to put all the pieces back together again. And very often we are able to help people go back to school, do something that that enables them to move forward in their life.
Mhm.
And that's what they do. I mean, that's what we do.
Mhm.
People come and they come when something happens in their life that was unexpected.
Right. Right, because the minimum wage is not always a living wage too, and so
And
people
that
have to
is
hold
true
down
too.
3 jobs, and then if they're part-time only working, and the company won't give life insurance or health insurance for people who are only part-time or who work under a certain amount of hours, even if they have 2 and 3 jobs, if they're all part-time, they're not going to have any health insurance anywhere, so they can really fall victim to the system of being working but poor. So
That's right.
it's so critical to combat the myth that that people who are houseless, don't have jobs and aren't trying to work and aren't doing what they can.
That's a very important point. Very
Thank you.
important. Mm-hmm.
Thank you for doing that work and fulfilling the Maimonidean top rung of the Raka idea. Like the highest thing is to teach a person to fish. Don't just give a person a fish, but you're giving them the opportunity to sustain themselves. So thank you. What have you found is surprising in working in interfaith spaces?
I think that very often we don't make an effort to get to know each other. And that's the most important thing. And I know that we don't always agree with each other on some topics, but there isn't any. I'm sure we all agree on making the world a better place. And so again, part of my being involved, and I will tell you that when I retired, first of all, I didn't learn to say no. And I am surprised myself. I said yes on a number of boards. And then after a few years, I said, no, I went off every board except Interfaith Neighbors.
Wow.
So it just is, I still feel that I have an opportunity to learn about other people and to teach other people about Judaism, which is very important.
Right. One thing that I wanted to ask you about is, rabbis are often pressured about what we say. Sometimes they think, that on a whole, we're too liberal or too conservative. And I'm thinking about Stephen Weiss, who founded the temple that you once served. He advocated for a free synagogue. And a lot of people say, oh, it's a free synagogue. No, it meant freedom of the pulpit.
That's right.
The ability to freely state those morals and values and lessons of Judaism that you have studied and you feel in your kishkas, that you feel in your guts, that this is the way it should be. So he wanted to create a place that was free for rabbis to be able to share those morals, values, and lessons, unencumbered by societal norms and expectations. And I think about your career, and I feel like you've been a really great example of someone, from my perspective, right, who's really done what you feel is ethical and ethically right, and you have a lot of integrity. So I was wondering if you had advice for rabbis, or really anyone who's choosing between who's choosing really between what the world wants us to be and who we actually are, or the Torah-based values that we hold dear. Like, what advice do you have for people who are kind of feeling that pressure?
Well, one of my first rules when I was first ordained, since I had mini skirts and long hair, and everybody knew what the first woman rabbi should be like and look like and dress like, etc. The number one rule is know yourself and be yourself. And I just really think that that's very important for all of us. I said before that I never would ask anyone to do anything I wouldn't do first. I do have standards, and I don't break the rules for my friends, which sometimes is difficult. Looked at a topic in terms of what does Judaism say about this?
Right.
It wasn't what I say about it.
Right. I love that so much of your rabbinate is about, treating your congregants with respect and, holding yourself to a high standard and, encouraging them in their growth as well as your own growth, right? I mean, it's that truly that sense of, we can do this together, like linking arms and moving forward into, what you can build in the world. Like, that's the joy of Judaism. It's not necessarily, vodka and latkes. It's really the text and the questions and the big questions that we're all trying to wrestle with as human beings, and seeing, how we can connect with thinkers that 1,000, 2,000 years old, years earlier. I was wondering a bit, oftentimes the transformative work that we effect in the world can also have unintended or unimagined consequences. So I was wondering if you can share what has been the most surprising results of your efforts.
I think it was in Boston one Hanukkah about 10 or 12 years ago. The Jewish community of Boston, the Federation, invited the four of us, the firsts of each of the movements, to come and participate, and I just thought it was a great idea. And so from that, it was my first opportunity to meet Rabbi Hurwitz, and I already knew Rabbi Amy Eilberg and Rabbi Sandy Sasso. And so we were there, and it was great. And from that came an idea to me that we could start a group called the Four Firsts, and we could travel around and tell our stories.
Yes.
So I started with my congregation on, I think it was my 40th anniversary. I invited them to come, and we put on a program in my synagogue. And then the next day we went to the Philadelphia Jewish Museum, and we put on our program there. And then from then on, for a while, we were traveling around. I was sort of I was in charge of getting the gigs. So, and after a while, it became a little difficult, really, for all of us to leave whatever we were doing and to do this. But I thought it was really important for people to see that four women of different theological backgrounds could respect each other and be civil to each other and sit on the same platform and tell their stories. And there were so many similarities in our stories. And I think it was really, really worthwhile because we know, we can probably think of examples of Jewish leaders, men, who can't sit on the same platform and talk to each other.
Right. That idea, is that you're building the world that you want to see, right? There's two approaches. I was just talking with someone who's one of the leaders of Black Lives Matter Los Angeles, and she was talking about how there's kind of two approaches when you're trying to make large systemic change, right? You can either try and change the systems that already are in place and transform them from within, or you can just go ahead and build the new world that you want to see that should have been built in the first place, right? Because today is the first day of the next 500 years, right?
That's right.
So how do we do both of those things? So I see that, in your career, you've done both. You've really opened up these major institutions that were, only for men. And also you've kind of helped create these new ones, right? With Yeshivat Maharat, but then also, helping create the Women's Rabbinic Network, right? It's such a wonderful organization that allows women rabbis to just be rabbis and just support one another and share texts and share answers to questions and best practices and just enjoy one another's leadership, shared leadership as well. So I wonder if that, it's such a creative process to imagine into that space what the world could be. What could it be if all four of us were on the stage together? What could it be if? So I was wondering, you're artistic now. You're getting into watercolors. You're getting into all these artistic pursuits in your retirement, and I was wondering if that's opened up other portals of your creativity, of your imaginings, of what the world could be like in the next 50 years, the next 100 years, how Judaism can get to these places that we haven't even had pause to imagine into yet. What would that look like?
You can't allow yourself just to be stuck in one place. You have to be thinking ahead of where are you going?
Right.
What do you want to create? And you mentioned my artwork. Actually, when I retired, I thought that was part of what I was going to be doing, and I haven't done it. I actually started it during a time when I was recuperating from one of my bouts with cancer. And I had always wanted to try painting, but I can't even draw a stick figure. So I figured abstract watercolor, that sounds good. And the equipment is easy to have, and you don't have to worry about this, that, and the other thing.
You don't need a spinning wheel or a kiln.
That's right. You don't need anything. And I never took a class or anything. That was out of the question when I was recuperating. And so I just read a lot of books about technique, and I got the paints and the brushes and everything. And I just started in, and I kind of thought that abstract watercolor is a lot like studying Torah.
Tell me.
Okay. Well, a devoted student always delves into the Torah text, and you look at what came before and what came after, and what the words and everything, the letters, and you really try to discover the meaning of the text. Well, the same thing, if a person who is observant looks at an abstract watercolor and tries to go delve into the brush strokes, and why is that there, and why is this, and so you're always looking for the meaning of the painting, and see if you could discover what the artist had in mind. So another thing I like about abstract watercolor is its spontaneity. You can just sit down and do it, and you watch the paint go wherever it will. And never has a painting ever turned out the way I planned it to turn out.
It's like life.
I mean, I just let it go and say, okay, we'll do this and we'll do that. And I think that's very exciting, the way that the color bleeds and blends, and it kind of merges and with other colors, and it just it creates motion. And I think that's really exciting, and that motion allows every painting to have a rhythm of its own.
It's such a joy that you have this ability to share with everyone, a reflection on the past 49 years. And I wondered, is there anywhere that you would like our listeners to, be directed, or to, where they can find you, or what the website is for the Neighbors Initiative that you have, the Interfaith Neighbors?
Well, that you can just go interfaithneighbors.org. That I've asked all women rabbis of all denominations to donate their papers to the American Jewish Archives in Cincinnati, so that when people want to do research about women rabbis, they can come to one place and find all that they need.
You're always thinking ahead, and
yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing so much of your life experiences and paving the way for all of us and holding the doors open for all of us. And thank you to our audience for tuning in. If you have someone that you'd like to recommend that we host on the show, please contact us at keepingitsacred.com. There you can also sign up for our newsletter and to stay up to date with all that we're programming for opportunities to gather together and more. Thank you everyone for keeping it sacred. Be well.